All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive on something that at first, seemed like a pretty straightforward case, but then turned out to be way more complicated and kind of heartbreaking, honestly.
Yeah.
We're talking about the recent deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, his wife, in their home in Santa Fe. And we've got this really in-depth report from AP News that goes into all the details of the investigation. And believe me, there are some twists and turns you just would not expect.
It's a case that I think really makes you think about the hidden lives, even of people you think you know, and how assumptions can be so misleading sometimes.
Okay, so to set the scene, authorities found their bodies on February 26th.
Yeah.
And immediately, all these red flags started popping up.
Yeah. I mean, even though they ruled out things like carbon monoxide poisoning right away and said they didn't think it was foul play, it's the timeline of everything. That's where the story gets really strange.
So Betsy, she was last seen out and about on February 11th. But here's the thing. Gene's pacemaker data shows his heart stopped on, February 18th. So that's a whole week later, meaning
Betsy was probably already gone for a whole week before Gene. And what makes it even sadder, with his advanced Alzheimer's, he probably didn't even know she had passed.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really tough thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it that caused Betsy's death?
Officially, it was hantavirus pulmonary syndrome.
Hantavirus. Now, I know you can get that from, rodents or something. But can you break that down a bit more for people? Because it sounds pretty serious.
Oh, it is. It's rare, but it's a potentially deadly respiratory illness. You get it from contact with rodent droppings, specifically from infected deer mice. And get this. This was the first case in New Mexico this whole year.
Okay. Wow. That is unsettling. So, I'm assuming people shouldn't be freaking out or anything, but it definitely raises some questions like, where is this virus most common? And what are some things people should be aware of?
It's found, globally, but here in the U.S., it's mainly in the western states. And it can turn into a severe and sometimes even fatal lung infection. So avoiding contact with rodents and their droppings, especially in enclosed spaces like sheds and garages, is super important.
Okay, good to know. So while Betsy's dealing with this rare virus, what about Gene? What did they say caused his death a week later?
Heart disease, which isn't that surprising considering his age. But it's the Alzheimer's diagnosis that really adds this whole other layer of tragedy. To imagine him in those last days, maybe not even understanding why Betsy wasn't around, it's just a really lonely and heartbreaking picture.
It makes you think, how much did his condition affect those final days? Was he even aware of what was going on? Did he have anyone there helping him?
Yeah, it's definitely something we can look into more as we go through the sources. But there's another weird twist in all of this. One of their 3 dogs was found dead, too. In a crate.
Wait, a dog died too. Okay, now things are getting even more complicated here.
It definitely adds to the mystery. At first, there's some confusion about what breed the dog was. And also, dogs can't get hantavirus.
So what did happen to the dog? Do they have any idea?
They're still looking into it. They're doing, an autopsy on the dog, and they're analyzing cell phone data from the house to see if they can figure out what happened.
It's like this whole case is just full of unanswered questions. The article also mentioned the condition of the bodies when they were found. It wasn't good.
Yeah, both were already decomposing, partly because of the dry climate in Santa Fe, which of course made it even harder to figure out what happened leading up to their deaths.
This is all just so sad. There's a quote in the article from a guy named Stuart Ashman. He knew Gene. And he said, all of us that knew him should have been checking on him. That makes you think, even people we think are doing fine might be struggling. And we might not even know.
It's a really powerful quote. It makes you think about how important it is to have a community, to check in on your loved ones, especially the ones who might be more vulnerable or isolated. We tend to assume everyone's okay. But sometimes there's a whole different story going on underneath.
Absolutely. We can lose sight of the people around us so easily, especially these days when everyone's so focused on themselves and being independent. But before we get into all that, I want to hear what the experts are saying about this case. The article mentioned a Dr. Michael Baden, a former medical examiner from New York City.
Oh yeah, Dr. Baden is a huge name in the field, and his analysis basically backs up what the authorities are saying. He especially talked about how tragic it is that Gene, because of the Alzheimer's, probably couldn't even cope with his wife's death.
It's just heartbreaking that even after death, Alzheimer's, this disease that takes so much away, is still part of the story. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If Gene had been healthy, would he have grieved differently? Would he have turned to his community for support?
Those are good questions. I mean, it reminds us that everyone experiences loss and grief in their own way, depending on their circumstances. But before we go too far down that road, I think we should take a moment to appreciate Gene Hackman. You know, the actor, the two-time Oscar winner. He was in so many incredible films like The French Connection, Hoosiers, and Superman. His career was amazing. It spanned decades. And he left behind this legacy that continues to inspire people.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's not forget about Betsy. Her name might not be as well known, but her life was just as fascinating. I mean, she was a concert pianist. That takes so much talent and dedication.
And the story of how she met Gene, it's pretty cool. It wasn't some Hollywood romance or anything. It was at a gym in California back in the mid-'80s. And they built this life together in Santa Fe, far away from all the glitz and glamour of Hollywood.
Sounds like they found something special in Santa Fe, a sense of belonging and peace. It's just heartbreaking to think they might have spent their last days feeling so isolated and sad.
Yeah, their story is a reminder that even people who are really famous, a lot of times they just want the simple things. Connecting with people, following their passions, being part of something bigger than themselves.
It's a message that speaks to all of us, no matter where we come from or what we do. But this is just the start of our deep dive. Stick with us as we dig deeper into this really complex and compelling story. We'll be exploring Gene and Betsy's lives, their impact on Santa Fe, and all those unanswered questions that still remain.
This case really highlights, that even when you have two deaths that seem connected, like a couple who die close together, their individual stories can be so different.
It's true. It's easy to think of them as one unit, but we already know Betsy and Gene were facing their own unique challenges. Two deaths, yeah, seemingly connected, but each with its own story.
Exactly. And while the circumstances surrounding their deaths are obviously tragic, it's important to remember that both Gene and Betsy had full and interesting lives. We've talked about Gene's incredible acting career, but what do you think drew him to a life in Santa Fe, a place so different from Hollywood?
Yeah, it is interesting that he walked away from acting in the early 2000s. He was at the top of his game, so what do you think caused him to make that move?
Well, Gene was a very private person. He rarely gave interviews and really seemed to value a life away from the spotlight. Santa Fe offered him that, a place where he could focus on things like painting and writing without the constant attention of Hollywood.
And he wasn't just, messing around with art. He co-authored 3 historical fiction novels, which shows how creative and intellectually curious he was.
For sure. Acting wasn't enough for him. He needed other ways to express himself, to explore different parts of who he was. And it seems like Santa Fe gave him the space to do that.
It makes you wonder if his need for privacy and a quiet life was made even stronger by the Alzheimer's. Maybe Santa Fe became like a safe haven for him as he dealt with that.
That's an interesting thought. It's possible that as his condition got worse, the peace and familiarity of Santa Fe became even more important for him.
And what about Betsy? What can you tell us about her life in Santa Fe? We know she was a concert pianist,
Yes.
but what else did she do?
Like Gene, Betsy seemed to really thrive in the creative energy of Santa Fe. Being a concert pianist takes incredible discipline and passion, qualities that probably extended to other areas of her life.
Right. The article mentioned they were involved with the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum and some local businesses. It sounds like they were really connected to their community.
Absolutely. They invested in local businesses and were on the board of the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, showing a commitment to the culture and economy of Santa Fe. They found a sense of belonging there, a purpose, a world away from the superficiality of Hollywood.
Yeah. They sound like a couple who, even with all their fame and success, found happiness in simple things, connecting with people, sharing their passions, being part of something bigger.
Their story is a good reminder that real happiness often comes from those simple things. Connecting with others, doing what you love, making a difference in the world.
Speaking of connecting with others, remember that quote from Stuart Ashman? He said, "All of us that knew him should have been checking on him." That really sticks with you, especially thinking about how isolated Gene and Betsy might have been in their final days.
It's a reminder that we need to check in on our loved ones, even the ones who seem to have it all. You never really know what someone might be going through, and the little kindness can go a long way.
It's a really important message, especially in this case. We've learned so much about Gene and Betsy's lives, their struggles, their passions, the quiet happiness they found in Santa Fe. But we still have unanswered questions, particularly about the dog's death.
Yeah. The dog's death is this big mystery in an already complicated case. We don't have all the answers yet, but the investigation's still going, The necropsy, the cell phone data analysis, they might give us some clues about what happened in those last few weeks.
It's almost like the dog's death is this missing piece of the puzzle. It can help us understand what happened to Jean and Betsy.
It's a good point. But even as we wait for those answers, we can think about what we've learned.
We've seen that even cases that seem simple can be incredibly complex, and assuming we know what's going on in someone's life can keep us from giving them the support they need. Going through all of this, I keep thinking, what if Jean hadn't had Alzheimer's? Would things have been different?
It's hard not to wonder, right? If he'd been, more with it, how would he have handled Betsy's death? Would he have reached out to people? I mean, we can't know for sure, but it just adds this whole other layer of sadness to everything.
It really makes you think about all the struggles people go through, especially as they get older. We might assume they're fine, but a lot of times they're dealing with things we don't even know about.
It's so true. It reminds us to check in on our loved ones, really make an effort to see how they're doing. Don't just assume everything's okay. A quick phone call, a visit, just showing you care can make a huge difference.
This case also brings up these two very different health challenges. Hantavirus and Alzheimer's. Both can be devastating.
Yeah, you're right. Hantavirus, while it's pretty rare, is no joke. It can be deadly. Betsy's case is a good reminder that we need to be aware of the risks from rodents and do what we can to prevent getting infected.
And Alzheimer's, well, that's a lot more common, sadly. It's a disease that slowly takes away your memories, your independence, and in the end, your life. It's just heartbreaking for everyone involved, not just the person who has it, but their family and friends who watch it happen.
It's a reminder that we have so much more to learn about both of these diseases. Research and support are so important if we're going to find effective treatments and hopefully one day cures.
This whole deep dive has been a real emotional roller coaster. Sadness, of course, for Jean and Betsy, but also it makes you appreciate connection and community and being aware of what others might be going through. What seemed like such a simple case turned out to be so much more complicated, full of hidden struggles and unanswered questions.
It's one of those stories that stays with you. It makes you think about how fragile life is, how important it is to have people you can count on, and to reach out to others. Even people who seem like they have everything figured out might be facing challenges we can't even imagine.
That's such a powerful message for everyone listening. We've come to the end of our deep dive into the lives and deaths of Jean Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. We hope this has encouraged you to learn more about hantavirus and Alzheimer's disease. They're serious issues that can have a huge impact on people's lives. The more we know about them, the better we can support those affected and work towards finding solutions. So check in on your loved ones, offer a helping hand, and just be there for each other. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.